Hey guys, and welcome back to our YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about tag racing versus shifter kart racing. What are the differences? Why should you race one class over the other? And what can be the potential outlook if you're racing in both those categories? Let's get stuck into it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just explain what tag racing is and what shifter kart racing is. Our tag stands for touch and go. So those engines are basically our IAMI X30, our Rotax 125, the PRD Galaxy, it could be the Vortex Rock engine. They're probably four of the main touch and go tag engines that are competed around the world. 125cc, water cooled engine, push button start. Very, very simple to get into it, and the parity of those engines is very good when they're all racing in the same category. When you start sort of throwing in different engines, some engines have a performance gain on a particular track, whether that's down the straights or out of the corners, more acceleration. But generally, when they're racing as a standalone class, the parity is very, very good for these newer engines. Now, when we're looking to our shifter kart engines, again, they can have different manufacturers. So there's TM, there's IAMI, there is Vortex, there's Maxter, produced by CRG, there's a Vortex, so there's quite a different manufacturers as well. But now what we're doing is we're throwing in 6 gears, a hand clutch. Hand clutch is only going to be used for our standing starts, and the gears is basically used from first is for the race start, after that's basically 2nd to 5th gear, 6th gear on our main straights. So that's got a fixed carburation as well. So once you're driving, you can't then tune your shifter kart engine. Where the tag engine, you can tune. There's some engines that are tunable, and there's also some engines that are fixed as well. Now, when we're looking at the speed differences between our tag engine compared to our shifter kart engine, the tag engine is going to be peaking at about 120, maybe 70 miles per hour. When we're getting to our shifter karts and they're getting to that 6th gear, that top end speed, we're looking at about 160 to 100 miles per hour on a straight line. So straight away, a very, very stark contrast between our top speeds. When we're looking at a track that's only going to be about 1 kilometer long, 40 k's difference, that's a lot in a straight line. Okay, so one of the main differences when it comes to driving the tag to the KZ or the shifter karts are that the shifter karts generally have four-wheel braking. So what do we mean by four-wheel braking is that they've got front-wheel brakes and also rear-wheel braking, where generally your tag karts just have rear-wheel braking. So there's different aspects when it comes to driving that way. Now, you can't sort of brake and turn like you can with just rear-wheel braking, because when you're in a tag kart, you can sort of brake, and if the kart dents around a little bit, you can still control it through your hands and the steering wheel. When it comes to forward braking, if you're braking really aggressively, you can't really turn because it's going to pinch the front tyres and they're going to lock up. Especially when it comes to the wet weather driving. That throws a whole new element when it comes to four-wheel braking as well. And there's also, you've got to adjust the bias. So you can adjust more front or more rear braking bias. So that's hard a transition, especially when you're racing the same class. Two classes on the same weekend. So if you're racing a tag kart and a shifter kart, changing between the two, straight away you've got speed difference of 40 k's an hour. Then you've got the front wheel brakes. So changing and adjusting your racing lines and how your braking capabilities are into a braking zone, that throws it from the driver. I've done it once before in Vegas, and I honestly would say that I struggled in both classes. I was still competitive in the tag racing. Then I jumped into the shifter kart literally straight after, and trying to get my head around four-wheel braking, standing starts, the speed. It was very, very hard for me within 10 minutes, space of literally straight away out for one race to go, and then you're back into a shifter kart. It was a hard transition to do. So you'd recommend probably if you're going to race, pick the one class for any given weekend. It's very hard to go from shifter to tag racing. Now, the next element when it comes to changing between tag racing and shifter kart racing is that you've got a standing start when it comes to your shifter kart program. Now, that's a pretty cool element because rolling starts, it's kind of hard just to literally slip by someone because you're all tracking at basically the same sort of speed. But when you come to standing starts, it's a good transition to learn in shifter racing for when you go into motor racing, because most categories have standing starts. Now it's a little bit different because when you go into a racing car, your clutch is on a pedal generally. When you go into a shifter kart, you've got a hand clutch. So having that feel in your clutch is actually quite a tricky feeling, because you can't really replicate that if you are old enough to drive a car. Now when you go to a traffic light, you put in the clutch, you select your gear, and away you go. But going into a shifter kart, you're sort of feeling that all through your hand tension. Depending on how quick you release it, is how much it's going to slip or how quick it's going to release off the standing starts. When you go to tag racing, you're literally just, you're on and off the accelerator or the brake. So you still get your two pedals, same as in the shifter kart, but now you're just throwing the hand motion in there as well. Then having to slip the gear at the right time. Once a standing start happens and you're actually underway with the green light, then it's how quick you're going to change the gears to get through first, second, third, fourth gears before the braking zones. So a different element to learn from tag to shifter kart racing is just how the clutch works, how quick the acceleration and how quick those gear changes need to be, because I think we go from 0 to 100 k's an hour in about 4 seconds in a KZ kart. So extremely fast. Power to weight ratio, there's not many racing cars that are actually comparable to a shifter kart. And that's why so many Formula 1 drivers, supercar and IndyCar drivers, they step back into a shifter kart, because it replicates the speeds they're tracking. 30 gear changes a lap in regards to a 40-second lap, compared to driving a racing car where things are spaced out a lot more. So shifter kart, you've got to be short and sharp, and it really helps those reflexes quite a lot. Now, one of the last things when it comes to the big differences between tag racing and our shifter kart racing is just the natural horsepower that you've got. So whether that means that in a tag kart you can accelerate, before the apex. So before the middle of the corner, you can sort of get on the gas and sort of, cruise around the corner in control. You concentrate on your exit speeds. KZ and shifter kart racing is not really about that, because if you power too early with the additional horsepower, you're going to lose a lot of control coming out of the corners. So knowing that you've got a lot of horsepower sitting right next to you, it's all about trying to get into the corner as fast as you can, using those four-wheel brakes to stop it as efficiently and as quickly as you can, and powering a little bit further around the corner, because you know that once you click through the gears, you're going to get that horsepower and that exit speed very, very quickly. So when it's, tag racing is all about that mid-corner speed, and even other categories keep up your mid-corner speed, keep up the RPM. But KZ is not about that. It's literally how fast you can get in and how fast you can get out of the corners, and not so much concentrating on the actual mid-corner speed or RPM. So competition-wise between your tag racing and your shifter kart racing, it does vary from country to country and also the series that you're competing in. For most people, tag racing is more accessible because the costs are down. There's a lot more engines available to people, so that brings the cost down naturally. Also, the amount of engine rebuilds and going through pistons like you might do on a KZ program. Also, it's a little bit cheaper, just the ongoing cost. Racing fuel for KZs, $8 a litre for some countries, compared to just literally pump fuel at a couple of bucks a litre for your tag racing. So, competition-wise, like I said, a lot of people in Australia seem to be racing in both categories, and the competition is very, very fierce in both. But I would say that more of the Australian champions and the more experienced drivers are still racing in the X30 category, where we're noticing a lot of people that are trying to get through to racing cars are going into KZ first. So do the junior racing, might do 1 year or 2 years in tag racing in Australian karting. And then if their ambitions are to move out of karting, it's a great stepping stone to go KZ racing, learn about the gears, fast reflexes, things are happening quite fast, then moving into car racing. But we're noticing that if you are going to just stay in kart racing because that's all your finances can take you to, then racing at a top level, you just stay in X30 or Rotax, whether that may be the case in your particular country. But you go to other places like in Europe, and the KZ category is just out of control with, past and present world champions, European champions. That's the pinnacle of racing, is the KZ category. And you're finding even a lot of older drivers that are professional kart racers. Their chassis manufacturers are supporting these drivers in the KZ category to develop their karts. So depending on where you are and the level of budget that your country generally has, determines sort of where the competition is. And as a racing driver, you want to be where the competition is. So if your country X30 is the dominant class, or road tax, whatever it may be, you tend to sort of veer your way to, you know what, I'm going to race where the best drivers are. I want to push my level up. But like I said, if your ambition is to, go into open wheel race cars or even to GT racing, then KZ presents a great opportunity to learn those skills that you can then translate into car racing down the track. So for me, having won titles in both X30, road tax, and also KZ, from a fun point of view, you can't beat shifter kart racing. Like the acceleration, the braking capacity, just the general speeds that you're traveling at, it's bloody exciting to race a shifter kart. But when it comes to competitive wise and actually just racing, like if you're going to have a 25 lap race against a handful of drivers, I'd much prefer to be racing an X30 because you can pass a lot easier with the different racing lines that you use in tag racing. But also it's just a general, every corner you can actually pass in X30, where in KZ, it's sort of a little bit tougher with the narrower entries that you take. And also once you bottleneck up, the kart in front has initial acceleration to bump and try and pull away that kart to kart and a half out of the corners. So then you sort of catch them into the next braking zone, and then it's that same cat and mouse sort of reaction to the karts that you're around. But when you get into X30, you can sort of, you're sort of very, very bumper to bumper around most corners. So even on the entry or the exit, it's sort of a little bit of acceleration, but not so much. It's not a big enough gap that you can't then go in at the next corner. So from a racing point of view, I prefer to race tag, but if I'm just going to be out on the track by myself, give me the KZ or the shifter karts any day of the week. Okay, so there are differences from tag racing to your KZ racing. As I said, give me a KZ if I want to race and do one lap, fastest lap that I can do, give me a KZ any day. But tag still has a lot of merit with the competition that's around, the parity in the engines and things like that. So I wouldn't just discount, if you're coming from juniors, don't just discount tag racing because it teaches drivers a lot racing into those more experienced racers, no matter whether they're going to go to racing cars down the track or not. Hope you've enjoyed this episode on tag racing versus KZ racing. I look forward to hearing from you guys soon. And just remember, if you are enjoying these episodes, click subscribe to our channel. We really enjoy providing this content for you guys. Take it easy. Cheers.